Hello, everyone. I'm Nejla. I'm going to be your host for today, calling you live from Berlin, Germany. We're going to have a great discussion on crafting the perfect developer platform. This is a lead dev webinar in partnership with Harness. So the webinar is going to be around 45 minutes, after which both myself and the amazing panelists are going to head over to the lead dev Slack to answer some of your questions in the channel named Engineering Velocity. We might also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please do submit those through the Zoom Q&A feature. And if we can get to them towards the end, we will. Otherwise, we'll drop them in Slack and we'll answer them there. So let's get started with some intros. Again, my name is Nejla. I am an engineering director at Delivery Hero. I just moved to Germany, and I'm really excited to introduce our great panelists. So could you guys take it away, starting with Paula?
Thanks, Nejla. Hi, I'm Paula Kennedy. I am the COO and co-founder of a company called Syntasso. We make an open source framework called Cratix, which is a framework for building internal developer platforms. And I am really excited to be on this panel to talk about what makes a good platform and what makes a bad platform and all things platform.
Awesome. I guess I will go next. So I'm Martin Reynolds. I'm field CTO at Harness. I've been at Harness for about a year. Prior to that, I was head of director for DevOps and IaaS and built out a platform at a independent software vendor. And honestly, before that, just lots of building stuff for about 30 years. So been around a while.
Hi everyone, I'm AB. I'm an EM at Clio in the UK, but before I transitioned into people leadership, I was a software developer on the developer experience team at Factorial. So I'm happy to be here to be discussing platforms.
Thank you. All right, so as I said, today we're going to talk about crafting the perfect developer platform. It's a super fun topic because it's one of those cases where engineers are actually their own customer for the thing that they're building. So to achieve this, we usually need to have conversations around what should be built versus bought. Developers naturally like to build things, but to function as a business, we also need to consider what can be more effectively bought. So in our webinar, the panelists will break down elements of their perfect IDP and will assess where it makes sense to build your own and where it makes sense to buy. So first, let's start with what does the P stand for in IDP and why is this distinction important? I think Paula has some strong opinions about this, so we'll start with you.
Thanks, Leslie. I mean, I always have strong opinions, but
yeah, I've noticed.
So it's an interesting question because IDP is a fairly new-ish term. It gets bandied around a lot, and people have different understandings of what the letters stand for. So the most common is either internal developer platform or internal developer portal, and the P is actually an important thing to differentiate between. For me, portal is an important part of the platform. So the portal, imagine the portal is kind of the user interface. It's the front door into the platform. And portals themselves have become super popular recently. We've seen Backstage and Port and Cortex and lots of portals becoming very popular. But it's sort of one part of the platform. It's how I think of it. A portal is very important. It's nice for developers to have that developer experience, to see what's available to them. But the portal is just one part. For me, the platform P is the more interesting. I mean, I'm biased because that's where I've spent a lot of my career and I love platforms, but it's the more interesting part because once you've gone through the portal into the platform, that's where the really fun stuff happens. Because what you're really trying to do with your platform, the core of platform engineering to me is about making developers' lives easier, reducing cognitive load, giving them a nice experience. But the platform has to do a lot of heavy lifting. It has to be able to do a lot of stuff. And the portal's one part. The magic happens behind the portal, is my very biased view.
So today we're here to talk about the magic. We're talking about the whole platform. That's the IDP we're discussing. And so transitioning to AB, what makes a good IDP?
Interesting. So I think that to better understand what makes a good IDP, it's first of all important that we kind of be intentional about why we have IDPs in the first place. IDPs are there to save devs time and help them focus on what they do best, which is shipping and actually having the ability to then see what's going on with what they have shipped to manage this software. Basically, the purpose of an IDP is to empower devs to be able to deliver their value faster with less friction and fewer burdens. In the context of that, I would then say that what makes a good IDP would be that, first of all, it's self-service. This means that devs should be able to independently spin up environments, deploy code to debug, to actually carry out any actions that they need to without having to depend on a platform team or a dev team somewhere or any other person. This way they can move faster and all blockers are removed. Secondly, I feel like it's important to state that a good IDP would be easy to use, because you can have stuff that's self-service, but then it's so hard to use and it takes time from the devs as opposed to giving them back time. And I think a way you can gauge this is how easy it is for you to onboard a dev to your platform. Do they have to watch so many tutorials, take so many courses just to understand how to use your platform? So it should be easy to use. So I'd say in general, a good IDP should increase developer productivity and velocity. If your IDP is not doing that, then probably not a good IDP.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Does someone have something to add?
I was just going to say, I
Yeah,
think that's
please.
a fairly good starting point for measuring. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit anyway, but it's really interesting. I worked with some people recently, and they took that onboarding time, that learning the whole thing, and they made it like hours instead of weeks, which is, you know, that is a sign of a, you know, a mature platform that's been built.
So just on that note, Martin, once you have an IDP, what metrics are you actually using to understand how it's going?
So I think there's lots of ways of measuring it, but I think some of the key ones you can actually stick to some of those core metrics, things like DORA and, you know, kind of how long is it taking time to get to through all the processes and into production, you know, and I've seen it also recorded in other ways, but really what you're trying to measure is how much time do the developers actually spend building those new features, solving problems for the, you know, for the customers of their software versus, you know, maybe debugging builds or, you know, change it or working out how to get an environment spun up or configuring their own development environment because they have to have all the right dependencies installed and everything else that makes life super complicated. So actually, you know, recording kind of, you know, how long is it taking to get from start to finish, end to end, and just some of those key milestones, you know, along the way, really kind of can shine out that value and see where you're adding it, and it's a really good way as well to talk about it internally to stakeholders who, you know, may not say, well, why are we building this? And it's like, well, okay, it used to take 4 weeks for a new feature to get to the customer, and now it takes 2 weeks. That means you can have twice as many features delivered. How does that feel? And, you know, new features generally mean happier customers, which means, you know, more customers, which means get to build more software, which is exciting because I like doing that.
Amazing. It's funny. We were talking beforehand. I said I'm excited to learn a lot from this group because I have more of a product engineering background, and it's really cool to talk about IDPs. You know, like a product, we need good UX, we need metrics to define how it's going, and we need to understand the customer. So, it's a really big parallel for me.
It
So yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's really interesting you said that. We
Yeah.
can't remember the title of it. I'm sure somebody can, we can post it afterwards. We actually had a discussion about platform engineering before on one of these lead dev webinars, and we were saying that good platform engineering teams can learn a lot from product
Hmm.
engineering teams because essentially you're building the platform for your customer is the developers. All those same
Yeah.
practices apply.
I would plus one to that, Martin. The thing that I've been talking about a lot, and I hear a lot, is like that platform as a product mentality, right? It's something that I used to work for Pivotal prior to founding Syntasso, and platform as a product was something we talked about then. And to your point, I was like, it's that product mindset, because the internal platform is a product that you are providing to your internal customers. You might not be selling it to them as such, but a lot of those product management practices still apply. The product should still be nice to use. People should want to use it. It should meet their needs, but that means you need to understand their needs. And I think one of the risks we often see, I see a lot, is platform engineers are wicked smart people, right? Like I spend a lot of time with platform engineers and I like them a lot. But there's a trap of thinking that they know what developers need because they're engineers too. And we're all just engineers and we'll all just build the things that people want because obviously they want what we want. And I think that trap of building what you think and not actually having that user kind of product mindset is a risk for sure.
Mm. Yeah, so on the note of like how engineers are using your IDP, can you talk about how a good IDP reduces context switching and just overall improves that dev experience, AB?
Okay, yeah. I'll say that switching between tools does actually waste time. It drains your energy mentally, and it can contribute to something called tool fatigue, which then ultimately impacts the DX. A good IDP should be able to address that. And I can think of two key ways. And the first one would be consolidation. So where possible, adopting solutions that consolidate a couple of functions into a separate tool. For example, let's say you use a tool for version control, another one for your CI/CD pipelines, another one for your developer documentation, or you use separate tools for error tracking, and then another one for broader observability. If there's a solution that can actually consolidate this into one tool, then I think it makes sense to go for that tool, because that way you reduce context switching due to the fact that devs can then finish their tasks, actually multiple tasks in one environment. It also shortens the curve for learning because you have to actually master less tools than maybe 50 or 40, and then you'll be more productive much faster. Another thing I think could help is something that Paula talked about earlier, which is portals. Leveraging portals to reduce context switching. In cases where it's impossible or it's not feasible to consolidate, I would say that I think portals could step in very nicely there, because they could serve as an interface to then have you get the visibility that you need for all your tools. I see the platform as a factory per se, and it has all the tools and the machines, and they're doing the things that they need to do. And then the portal is like the control room where you have visibility over what is happening. So if you have a portal, then it prevents you from having to go down to the factory to then work with all the individual tools. It's like that's the entire complexity has been abstracted away, and then you can just deal with the things that you need part-time. I think that way there's lesser cognitive load, and that improves the experience for the developers.
Just to add to that, maybe I think that also ties in with that discoverability aspect, right? You mentioned kind of the portal helps with the context switching, also with just developers knowing the tools that are available, right? That visibility. Sometimes I was talking to a customer just this week where they've got a big company, lots and lots of teams. Each team has sort of a DevOps mentality, lots of you build it, you run it, they're all building their own things, etc. And super talented developers across all these different teams building cool stuff. But then cross teams, no one knows what the other team has got. No one's really sharing expertise. There's no central repository. There's different repos, there's just different information all over the place in silos. And it's a communication issue at the heart. But the one technical solution to that communication issue is that centralized platform and kind of that portal that shows it, which can help with the context switching, but also the devs thinking, well, what should I use for my CI/CD? What should I use for this particular thing? Oh, I can see the services that are already within my organization. I might work out which team has expertise in that tool, and I could go talk to that team and not have to do everything from first principles.
Mm.
I,
Kind of, go ahead, Martin. Sorry.
No, I was going to say I think that's a fair point, and it resonated with something. It was a few weeks back now, but I was chatting with the VP of Platform Engineering, and he was basically saying, "I just have a vision that my engineers get one log on, and they log on into that IDP, and from there they can do everything. And I don't care if it's 10, 15 tools under the covers. That should almost be abstracted from them." Right? Because I just want them to have the most simple experience and be able to find everything in the same place, get everything they need, and do everything they want. And I think that aspiration, is probably the right place to be going. It might take a
Yeah.
little while to get there, but I think it is like having that vision as a kind of target is a great place to go.
I also want to say that I think it's easier to get there if you have the mindset that IDPs are there to enable devs to focus on what they do best. It's not
Yeah.
about having 50 tools. It's about improving their experience, their speed, and their productivity. With that sort of mindset, it's easier to then say, oh, I just want them to just have a single logon and have everything in an interface.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point. There was an article from Sam Newman, I think it was last year, where he talked about we shouldn't call them platform engineering teams, because there's a bit of nominative determinism where if you say your job is to be a platform engineer, then the thing you're going to do is build a platform. And actually, like you just said, AB, the goal is not build the best platform. The platform is a means to an end of supporting the developers to do their jobs. So maybe we should call ourselves developer supporting team, with just to get that mindset switch. Because if you think you're going to be building a platform, you're going to build the best, shiniest platform, but maybe lose sight of the goal of the platform, which is a risk.
That's true. I used to be part of a DX team, and this is the team that improves the experience for the developer. So we always had that at the back of our minds, that it's not about the next tool, it's about how to help devs do their jobs much easier.
This is awesome, and I want to transition the conversation from like, well, what makes a good thing to like, well, how do we get to creating the thing? So Paula, maybe you can talk a bit more about how do you decide like what to actually build versus buy for your IDP? Like, do you have any frameworks? When would you like standardize versus innovate? And I think it would be great to tie this in with an audience question that I want to read as well. So the question is, given the complexity of providing a good IDP, when would an internally developed solution be worth the investment instead of relying on existing tools? So you accepting the downside of less consistency and more context switches.
Oh, I
Big
love that
question. Sorry.
No, I
Throwing it all
love
at
it.
you. Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so with my team internally, we've been talking a bit about it's not build or buy. We think of it as three choices: build, buy, or blend. And we most typically see blend, right? So to give you some context, my background is with Pivotal. We worked on Pivotal Cloud Foundry, which was very much buy, and we had very much a message of buy Pivotal Cloud Foundry, which was a platform as a service, and everything comes out of the box. You don't need to do anything. It's just a lovely GUI and click, and it's all done. Right? It was a fantastic product, still is a fantastic product, but it was very good for a very small percentage of workloads because Pivotal was very opinionated. So I think the things to consider when you're buying someone else's tool, whatever the tool is, actually, doesn't matter. When you buy someone else's tool, you are buying their baked in opinions, right? That's the nature of it. Someone else built it, you're buying their opinions on how it should be built. Fine. If you build yourself, you can build in whatever opinions you feel like. That's the joy of building. And we know that actually engineers typically have a bias towards building, right? People, that's why they're engineers. They love to build stuff. So there's always a natural bias to build it. but it's a little bit like getting a puppy for Christmas, is the classic thing people say. Like, it's great to build it, but then you've got to take care of it forever. I mean, puppies don't live forever, but you get the idea, right? You've got to maintain that thing forever. So if you've built it yourself, you can't just pick up the phone and call support, or, get an engineer to come and help you. Like, you have to maintain that thing forever. So it's a constant way up of buying versus building. And like I said, we talk a lot internally about blend. And but the way we see it, at least the way we talk about it conceptually, is there was an awful lot of stuff that you definitely don't want to build. Like, you're not going to go out and build your own data center. You're not going to build your own electricity power supplier. You're going to be buying an awful lot of stuff. You're going to buy the power, the compute, like, there's a lot of stuff you're just going to buy. And it's about just finding the line. And we try to think about it as, if you're a bank, let's say, and your superpower is offering really great financial products, your superpower does not need to be building great internal platforms, because other people can build a lot of those key parts for you. So what you need to do is focus on where's your special part? What's the things that are really going to help your developers? And finding the line of build everything that you can and sprinkle your extra like magic on top, so that you are standing on almost the shoulders of giants. You buy all these components, or open source, right? I'm saying buy in sort of all software that you can get kind of off the shelf, right? Open source or buying. But then there'll be certain bits that you need to build. And what I saw at Pivotal, what I see constantly is wherever someone's bought a solution, there's always some customization you have to do. There's always some things, edge cases that don't fit. There's always some amount. So when you're weighing up the build versus buy decision, a key thing to look for, I think, is flexibility, extensibility, customizability. I can't think of any more abilities, but you get the idea. Like, how much can you take in someone else's thing that maybe fits 80%, 90% of what you need, but how easy is it to extend? And I think something like I mean, I'm biased again, but the Kubernetes ecosystem, Kubernetes as a kind of a base infra, super extensible. That's the joy of it. I mean, the CNCF landscape is flipping massive, but the great thing is there's lots of ways to extend, customize, tweak, etc., kind of to get what you need. So yeah, that and the thing is, there's not one simple answer. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but it's not one straightforward, oh, do this thing, because each organization is actually different and has different needs, and where that build versus buy sits will be context specific. That's the key thing. You can only weigh that up for yourself based on your needs, the skills of your team, the size of your organization, the budget that you've got, etc., etc.
Yeah, there was a couple of things in there that I loved. So one, I have to say, and this is, I think this is just true across the board, that extensibility and integration piece is so important. There's, having one tool that did everything for your developer platform seems unlikely, right? Because I don't think there's companies out there that do all of it. They might do large chunks of it, but they're never going to do everything. And ultimately, the infrastructure that powers your portal, your platform, is quite often bespoke to your software stack needs, right? So, but I think that ability to be extensible is absolutely key. Like, not just extensible, but ease of integration between two tools. It should be easy to integrate between, your internal developer portal and your CI and your CD, or your infrastructure as code services, or your security scanning, or whatever else it is that you're doing across the board, to support that, or your development environments, or your QA environments, right? You want it to be able to integrate with all of those. I think that's kind of it's a key metric around that. I I thought the other thing that was super interesting in there is that kind of where the line is, and I'm kind of leaning towards the question here, given the complexity of building one. I think it's where is the line of where you build a developer portal versus just have, everybody looking after their own house, so to speak. Um, I think it generally comes with a certain amount of scale and momentum. I think that is a kind of a key. The point at which you're spending, if you're spending as much time for every product or service that you build, and they're all a little bit bespoke, and you're spending a lot of time maintaining each of those environments versus having some standardization, across the piece, which can actually reduce workload and can reduce context switching too, and reduce the kind of the overall cognitive load, I think ultimately helps. But it requires will from above and below, I think. I think there's a piece there that you need to make sure that both those things are in place. But I think that line, there is a line at which, and you used a bank as an example, they are very good at saying, they're also very good at saying, actually, we want a consistent way to deploy because, and common technology stacks because of their scale and also because they're
Absolutely.
regulated.
I'd also add that when the market already has mature solutions that can actually support your needs, then maybe it just makes sense to use those.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I mentioned Kubernetes. I think one thing people love it or hate it or both, but one thing it has going for it is it just turned 10 years old last year. 2024, it was 10 years old, and massive community. So, to your point about mature solutions, it's um it's certainly on the Kubernetes itself is much more down on the build end of that build buy spectrum, but there's a lot of people out there who use it. There's a lot of expertise, there's a lot of information you can find, there's a lot of education. So there's certainly something around uh when you're buying something that is like being used, or you can kind of like easily understand and ask for support and go to user like conferences, etc. There's benefit there for sure.
Yeah.
So you go ahead, Martin. We have
No, no,
time.
I was actually just agreeing. Sorry.
Yeah, this is great discussion. So let's say like, okay, you built the thing and you have people using it. Then what? Like, how do you actually like know that what you're using is valuable? Like, I think Paula, you mentioned something when we were prepping for this around like minimum viable platform versus thinnest viable platform. Can you define those for the audience?
Sure. It's funny. I feel like this is one of those things that has a lot of discussion, or maybe it just has discussion in my echo chamber. But anyway, minimum viable platform basically imagine is similar to minimum viable product, right? What's the thing to get us started? What's the thin slice that we can put something out in the world and get feedback from the users? So we mentioned already platform as a product being a mindset shift about understanding that you're building something for people. You're not building it for funsies. You're not building it for yourself. You're building it to help your developers. So minimum viable platform, build just enough platform to ensure it meets the user's needs, get the feedback. It's the fast feedback, it's the starting point. It's like, let's get something and make sure it's good and useful, and then iterate from there. For me, the concept of thinnest viable platform is slightly different. People tend to mix it up or think that maybe thinnest viable platform is like a trendy new way of saying minimum viable platform. For me, it's not that. It's that your platform is for life, not just for Christmas. So once you have your platform, it's there, it's sticky, it's going to be maintained. And a risk, we talk in Syntasa, we talk a lot about platform decay as a term we use, because there's a truism that says you've got a platform whether you know it or not. Most organizations have some way of getting code from laptop to production, right? You've got a platform somewhere, whether it's a big ball of mud or whether it's highly curated, you've got a platform. So you have something. The chancellor, we talked to a lot of people who've had platforms for a while, whatever it is, doesn't matter the tech stack, but they've got a platform of some description and it's creaking at the seams. It's bloated. It's got so many things. The platform itself has become the opposite. It's become a bottleneck, not an enabler. It's just become a pain. I wasn't going to swear then, but anyway, it's become a pain. So thinnest viable platform is more around constantly pruning that platform, constantly making sure it's just enough platform to be an enabler without becoming so bloated that it's actually a blocker or a hindrance. So trying to keep it as thin as possible, meaning don't keep adding new features, don't keep adding new tools. You don't need like that fifth CI/CD system. You don't need that seventh database available. Like, how do you keep it relevant and fit for purpose with deprecating stuff as well as adding stuff? So for me, that thinnest viable platform is an important differentiation from a minimum viable platform.
I'm laughing a little bit because I think in my previous company we were doing some thinnest viable platform and I didn't even realize it. But just listening to that
Nice.
description, I can still remember, there were times where there were some things that we were building, but at the same time we were saying actually we need to move off this other thing and deprecate it and move it away because actually it's not really maintainable, or it's not performance, or it's not adding the right value. So it's really interesting because that is, you know I I think it, to a degree as well, that thinnest viable platform actually shows the level of maturity, because I do think um, there is a rush to fill all the gaps, if that makes sense, especially
Yeah.
if you have a environment which is full of lots of tech stacks. So,
Yeah.
I worked previously and we had everything from COBOL to Java to Go to Node to, so many different things. There were things that were containerized, there were things that were serverless, there were, it was all over the place, getting some consistency that worked for the majority, but not necessarily the all, and working out where the value points were to serve from a platform versus belonging to the particular service was kind of key to making that work. But I think at the start, there was always the kind of, if you like, the vision of no, we'll support everything or we'll make them
Yeah.
change. Right. And I think it kind of goes back to that earlier comment that you made around blend, right? What you actually want to do is, even when you're providing your platform services and your infrastructure, again, it's a blend. You want a mix of, stuff that just belongs to a service that they might have to maintain versus stuff that is serviced via the platform. And I think that works really well. And so I enjoyed the description, but it did make me smile because I was like, oh, I didn't know that's what we
You've
were.
done that. It's interesting to go back to what you said about metrics, though, because just a thing to be aware of, if your metric, if as a platform team you have a KPI or an OKR that says build 10 features, right? It can tend to skew what the platform team is focused on. If you perceive the platform value as being just keep adding more stuff, like you said, just keep supporting more stuff, just keep like this backlog we've got of 50 features. If we get 30 delivered, we are killing it. Like that mindset, that's where you'd see like platform bloat and like textbook. Like it should, the platform value, be careful that your metric doesn't incentivize that wrong behavior. It shouldn't be keep adding. It should be a metric around value, however you measure that, but like some value in the platform, not just more and more features.
Yes.
Yeah. It actually reminds me of like one of my favorite product strategies as well, which is why don't you try like A/B experiments where you delete features off the page and see what the impact is. So it's kind of, the same thing. Like
It's
let's
just
not
product
bloat the
management,
user.
right?
Yeah, let's not bloat user experiences. I love it. So, okay, how do you know after you've had engineers using the platform for a while if they are actually finding value, like at the user level?
So yeah, that was a almost perfect segue from what what I was talking about. But so that value piece is really interesting because I think adding new features probably isn't, just harking back to that, adding new features all the time to a platform especially isn't necessarily the thing. And how do you measure the value of a platform? And whether the devs like it, love it, etc. I think there's multiple things here. I think some of it is around adoption, right? So, if you build something in your platform and nobody's using it, that it's either because they don't need it or they don't like the way it's presented to them, right? And if you're not engaging with them to solve those problems, that is definitely a big part of it. But I think I feel like adoption and the amount of time it saves is probably a better metric of value than necessarily how many features your platform has, right? So, if you're reducing the amount of toil a developer does, the non-development stuff, through your platform, and it kind of harks back to the what we talked about right near the start too. But if you're reducing that, then really, that's how they're finding value. But, you know, and this probably is more the product engineering side, but ask them. Like, ask them how they feel about it, and ask them the things that they think are good, ask them the things that they think could be better. ask the things that they think are completely useless or painful. Like, I can remember building things that where people would say, "Oh, we think this is a great idea, but it's really difficult to use." So like what you've done is you've solved a problem by creating a problem, which is not a great, not a great value driver. I think if you take that and scale it up as well, it then rolls up into how do you describe the value of it to the business, overall, because, platforms take investments, they take, and even if it isn't direct financial investment, it kind of is, right? Because you're paying salaries, etc., on top of that, and as well as all the infrastructure that supports it, you need to be able to report up and show the value to that, so and that can show in multiple ways. Actually, onboarding time is reduced. Developer attrition is lower. So, staff want to stay and work here. They enjoy working here. Kind of a developer happiness type scores. And I know there's many ways of doing that, has improved. The number of things that we get delivered come through. In fact, uh, I don't think I can say which bank it is, but one of the largest banks in the world, US based, when they were talking about their internal developer platform and their developer experience, their biggest measure was their external customers' happiness. So they felt like if they were doing all the right things internally and their developers were happy and effective and productive, then the experience for their end customers would improve, and so their net promoter score would improve as a result. So they are actually using the net promoter score as a way to measure the success of their internal developer platform. And because that's ultimately they felt like that that good feeling and the value would flow all the way through to the products that they were producing, not just their internal products that they were consuming.
Let
So
me
a lot in there.
let me add something to that. I think the key thing there is actually innovation. Happiness leads to innovation. When you are satisfied, you're not stressed, you can just ship your code, then you have the time to think about new ways to make your customers happy. So I think it's a good one to actually tie that to the user experience. Interesting.
Yeah. I
I
have
love
to
that.
say when I heard that quote, I did love it. It was one I remember listening to him speak and just writing it down straight away. I'm like, okay, that is such a good way to do that. I love that.
So let's bring it back to AB. As you're scaling your team and your products, the products that you're building, how do you know if the IDP you have is still suiting the needs of your team and products?
Okay, so I think a primary way to measure the success of an IDP is whether it continues to meet your needs as you scale. Because at a certain stage, it might be a good IDP, and then at another stage, it might be very bad. It's the same one, but just because you have scaled and you're now like so many people, it doesn't cater to your needs anymore. So I think a question would be, how much time and effort are we expending trying to adapt our tools, extend their functionality, or ultimately replace them due to our evolving requirements? And scope creep can be a good sign, a good warning sign. This is something that I see with tools that are built internally, where a tool starts by being used for something, but then it starts being used for 15 other things that it actually wasn't built to handle. For example, a team builds a feature flag system, which they intend to use to just test code safely in production, ship features incrementally, and then product says, oh, this is an amazing feature, and then they want to use it for A/B testing, experiments, and analytics, and the tool wasn't built to do that. And then we have to invest time and energy trying to adapt that tool to the changing requirements. So I think once you see that, that's a good way to identify that, okay, my tools are not meeting my needs. So you would have to do a cost what's it called, a cost benefit analysis and say, okay, what's the cost of constantly adapting my tool to my evolving requirements, as opposed to just getting something that can scale with me as I scale. I think the other thing will be something that we have talked about a whole lot, which is asking the developers. The X is like UX. So you ask the user for feedback. So you say, this is the tool that we have. What do you think? Is it actually helping you, or do you have to perform a lot of gymnastics to get things done? That feedback then helps you know if your tools are actually right for you at that time, or you need to begin to consider a change.
And I'm just gonna like interrupt you to add that I think you just answered another question that was asked in the Q&A. The question is, do you have some advice on how to gain a better understanding of what the engineers actually need to provide the right platform? And I think, yeah, perfectly summarized. I would say go find your favorite PM, ask them to show you how to do user research, and talk to the engineers and capture the requirements that way. But you can please elaborate if you guys have any more comments.
So I was just going to say on the back of that, I do think that that kind of the asking thing is, but I also think you can get yourself a little bit of the way there by looking at what people are actually doing now to understand the right bits to invest in your platform. I don't know. Maybe you don't have anywhere to deploy .NET applications, but you've got one. Is that really a good investment? But actually, if you actually have like 100 .NET services, then maybe finding a good way to deploy those .NET services would be a better way. And it applies across the piece, right? So, and sometimes it isn't about developer experience. It's actually just about um, we're regulated in a certain way. We need a better way to do our security scanning, or we need a better way to do our auditing, right? And so that is a less direct impact on that developer experience. But if you don't have it, what tends to happen is, especially with things like auditing, they have a bad time for 2 weeks every year when that is happening, right?
Yeah.
But if you're kind of building it into your platform and the way you build your software, then actually you can suddenly free them from that burden. And it is
Mm.
actually a benefit because it tends to be incredibly disruptive, right? So, sometimes it's about making sure that the new things that you might have to do because of a change in legislation or whatever it is. I mean, take DORA for if you're in a regulated environment, not DORA the metrics, DORA the regulation, which is, about having resilient infrastructure for critical infrastructure, so electricity, healthcare, banks. You know, how do you add that resiliency testing into your platform without disrupting the engineers? So it's ongoing.
Thank you guys so much. I mean, I feel like we could talk all day. This is the most fun I could have on a Wednesday. I don't know about the rest of you. Um, Thank you all for the insights. I learned so much. So we're gonna head over to the lead dev Slack now. The channel is called Engineering Velocity. So please head over there. The Slack community is awesome, and we can continue the discussion if there are any more questions. So thank you for joining, and we will see you all next time.